This vid is about my eyes being opened to 9/11. I remember having dinner with my brother, Ken, shortly after the 9/11 event. And he tried to tell me that the popular story about how it wasn't what it seemed and how the U.S. government did it to ourselves. And at the time I remember saying almost exactly these words: I will never believe that the U.S. government would do that to us. Well, that's changed. I had such a strong faith in the United States and our goodness that I transferred that incorrectly to our government. And we have my blinders, if you will, my rose-colored glasses. Can't see the myth anymore. You have videos out there that are easy to see. They're not, nobody can hide them from us. They're so numerous. And we have it's the way those buildings fell. There's no way that was anything but a planned demolition. See, at the time I remember the year 2000 was, they were talking about peace dividends. They were closing military bases. And the military was being downsized because the Soviet Union was no longer a threat. And we really didn't have a threat. Now, the bad thing about peace is that war companies lose money. Peace is a threat to the war industry. It's always been a threat to the war industry. And, well, the only way to get war back is to make sure the American people know how threatened they are. So you make up a group of bad guys and they attack us. And so now we have 10 years of growing government, shrinking constitution, and fear as government agents look in the pants of children and, well, they're planning, the things they're planning are either the Bible is a prophetic fortune teller or the New World Order, if you will, got their master plan from the Bible, something, planning a cashless society with whatever. I won't bore you. A lot of people think that's crazy talk. But we've had 10 years of constant war, going after people inexplicably. Now capped off with the what should I call it? I'll just call it simply a killing of a dead man, Osama bin Laden, and his disposal in the ocean. My eyes have been opened and they do nothing but cry. I thought we were better than this at one time. I don't know about that, but we have what we have now is wrong. It's just wrong. It's wrong because our news system is dead. It's been purchased and consolidated into a mouthpiece of a few. And people still believe them. I don't know why. What little independent reporting is given is not listened to and not believed. And so whatever truth is out there that needs to be told is never going to be heard. Because people are watching Dancing with the Stars and silliness while Rome is burning around us. This will not go well. For 10 years plus our borders have been open while we've been fighting a war on terror. And as irrational as that seems, we don't do anything about it. We're given excuses and vagaries. Well, the government keeps rolling along down the same path of open border madness and clampdowns on our own people. Our police have become a terror squad, many of whom wear black uniforms and act like we're the suspects. I don't know what to say. This is a crime. And the criminals are those who are supposed to prosecute people. There is a history of corruption and deception that is undeniable. And it has no boundaries from administration to administration. Whoever gets elected is just a show. He's a face for the public. And any mention of hope and change transparency in elections, campaigns, it's just a tap dance. And meanwhile, whoever they are, seem to have a goal that doesn't seem benevolent to us, to towards us. We, people of the United States, it appears have been used to fund a grand renovation while we're told fancy lies. I don't really honestly know where this is going to end, but it does not look as if it's going to end well or in the distant future. It appears there's a end to this chapter coming up. Maybe an end to the book. I don't know. But people, if you're going to wake up, do so quickly. Back to the 9/11 videos. That's so amazing that I believed it. It shows how brainwashed I was. Go find some videos of building demolition where they plant explosives and watch the buildings free fall into a big pile of rubble. And then watch the 9/11 video and watch those buildings free fall into a pile of rubble. Not just one building, but two. Approximately 1/2 hour after they were hit at the top, they each fell into a pile of rubble, free fall, with no support. And I believed that was due to a plane hitting the top. I could understand if the buildings collapsed sideways or partially, but it was complete demolition of both buildings. And then the Building 7 was, if you haven't seen anything about Building 7, I hadn't either. Because I believed we were good. And I believe the people in the military are good. They're honorable people, most of them. But another part of the evidence is that our entire defense grid malfunctioned at that time. When planes went off course, we should have scrambled everything, but nothing got scrambled. I'll try to remember to append a 9/11 truth video onto the end of this when I get done. I don't know how much truth is in that truth video, but I don't know what truth is in any truth anymore, really. And the thing about this whole thing is given the government yet more excuse to expand government. And that's the only thing government is good at. Growing. They have no real benefit to society, just to themselves. Department of Homeland Security has trickled money into the local police departments, so that now the local police departments are nothing but subsidiaries of the national police grid. And once again, the line in the Declaration of Independence where it says, "You have kept standing armies against us, among us, in times of peace," is again alive. And tyranny has prospered and bloomed. This Homeland Security thing has been a grand distraction to get us to accept things we should never have accepted. The most recent of which is I guess it was a ruling by the Indiana State Supreme Court that said police may enter your home for any reason or no reason at all. As if the Fourth Amendment has been erased. But that's not the first time the Constitution has been changed illegally. I won't go into the rest of it because it doesn't seem to matter to anybody else. But we had an amendment process that if we all agreed we could change things, but now we're a government of the ruler, by the ruler, whoever that is. I know it appears to be Barack Obama, but he's not really in charge of anything. He's going to be removed pretty soon. And it'll be a big scandal, and it'll make it look like we're finally in charge of our government again, but we won't be. As in a way, it appears as if he's destined to be removed in a scandal so the next person can take over, but it's all going to be the same. You know, I really still have a hard time believing some days that people who we trust would do this to us. But but then again, after thinking about it again, I have a hard time not believing it. The reason they do this is because we do trust them. They say, "Trust me," and we do it. I don't know why. Because we want things to stay the same. We want to keep getting our cable television and internet, and we want a flow of gasoline, and we want what we want. For that end, we're willing to do. Well, we are willing to ignore anything. It's pretty funny. We're the perfect mark. Con artists dream. This latest stuff, though, is so obvious that if we're not seeing it, then we truly are blind people. The Bin Laden killing was too much. The way they wanted him so badly, they went after him for 10 years, and then once they finally got him, they threw him in the ocean because of some Muslim respect, or a respect for a Muslim ritual which doesn't exist. Nobody really talks about it. Sorry, they're mowing. And no questions asked. Even though this was a man with a kidney disorder which gave him like a 5-year time span tops. And we haven't heard from him forever except for scratchy tapes. Coincidentally, Barack Obama released a bad forgery of his birth certificate shortly after. Then he went on. Sorry, it's going to get loud. I'll turn it off. Even though Barack Obama released his latest and greatest version of birth certificate, a forgery so filled with holes it was quickly apparent to anybody versed with what's that Corel Draw program? It escapes me now. Graphics program. You see the variations and the incorrect similarities that shouldn't be there. Serial number out of order. Then lo and behold, of course that's shortly after he announced his re-election bid. But then after he announces his re-election bid, he releases his birth certificate. And then, while people are discussing the authenticity of it, we finally catch bin Laden. A man stuck on ice, a dead man stuck on ice for many years. And to prove that it wasn't a true event, they threw the body in the ocean. And the most sought-after man in the last decade, they threw in the ocean. And nobody says a word. Because we want to believe that things are the way they seem. We're funny people. And that's, of course, right before Jerome Corsi releases his book titled, Where is Obama's Birth Certificate? But the funny thing is, the question still stands. Where is the birth certificate? Now that he's committed himself with this new forgery, it's likely this will take him out of office. See, the funny thing is, it is truly a bad forgery. Government people can do better than this. I mean, these are trained people. Trained in the art of deception and forgery for warfare. But this forgery has no support at all. So, Jerome Corsi has released his new book with a bunch of new facts proving the man was born in Kenya. And that there's been an ongoing lie ever since the campaign for Barack Obama started, and he was never vetted by anybody, especially the press. So at some point in time, the press is likely to turn against the man. It's almost like Obama has been set up as a willing dupe, or perhaps a non-willing dupe. It's easy to play on a man's vanity and get him into positions where he doesn't belong. And, well, just seems that's what happened here. We're fed so many lies anymore that it's almost as if the lies appear true and the truth appears to be lies, but they can be still told. You can still tell the difference. And as world events grow more insane, I mean, we're going into Libya and killing how many people? For why? To protect people? Okay. Gaddafi started out as our enemy, bad terrorist, then he became our friend for about 5-6 years. Now he's a bad guy again. We got to kill him, but we're not trying to kill him. We're not going to go in there and start a land war. We're just going to bomb the hell out of them because we're humanitarians, etc. And it seems that we're trying to start a war with Syria. We're trying to start something with Pakistan. In other words, escalate everything, and we're trying to limit Israel back to its 1967 borders, which is impossible because they won these borders in a bloody war that cost them a lot, and they've grown into the area. But regardless, if we're escalating it into another World War III, just think of the financials on all of the war companies. It'll be huge. Invest now while you still can. Where was I? Oh yes, as the world events grow more insane, television grows more inane. That's funny. And the dumber they make it, the more we watch it. Or some people have the common sense to turn it off, and they occupy themselves with video games and other such. And thank goodness they developed the phrase conspiracy theory as a label for anyone who questions government. Because anyone who questions government is automatically, it's like a Pavlov's dog reflex action. Question government, conspiracy theorist. Ridiculous. Ha 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 ha. No, things are just going along just as they should. And, in the background, while all this inanity and insanity is going on, infrastructure is being placed that will allow the book 1984 to come to life in new and unimagined ways. I mean, the TSA alone is just unbelievable. You can't even have cops reach down your pants, but you can have a stranger at an airport reach down your hands wearing blue gloves that they've used when they reach down the pants of the guy before you, and for some reason those guys are not prosecuted. But I guess I'm still assuming cops cannot reach down your pants. I haven't checked really recently. I know cops can do just about anything else they want to do, including take anything they want. They can break up your family without a second thought. And no repercussions towards them at all. They can drive you insane with their constant harassment. Because they're assumed virtue and we're assumed guilty. And this real recent revelation about the Fourth Amendment is just making it official. It's been that way for a long time. The Miranda rights are gone. If they were ever in place, they're gone. They don't have to read them to you. And they aren't relevant anyway. The prison system has been turned into an industry with just look on the internet. I'm not making this up. I've told people about it and they don't believe me. Many prisons are actually run by for-profit corporations, not by states or governments. And their profit and loss line is dependent on there being a lot of criminals. The more criminals, the more crime, the more profit for them. Which means our lives are nothing but cattle. It's been moving that way for a long time. I mean, the Drug Enforcement Agency started in the early 70s. Department of Energy started in the 70s. Department of Education started in the 70s. That was the last gift from Jimmy Carter. And we have. I mean, they don't try to stop the drugs at the border. They don't try to get us more energy. They don't try to educate us better. And of course, the 9/11 event brought us the Department of Homeland Security and the TSA. And all of these things managed to get us more government. Like I said earlier, the number one product of government is more government. It's the only thing they're good at. But now they're brewing something different. All of this is heading towards a World War III scenario. And it sounds like they're preparing us for an actual nuclear explosion somewhere. And it wouldn't surprise me if it would be the United States. I don't think they caused the Japan reactor hell. But I believe if they could, they would have. But I think they believe it's fortunate. More chaos is what they love the best. I mean, look at the oil spill, the BP oil spill in the Gulf. It was weeks before I mean, they just let it spew oil forth everywhere for weeks, and there was little activity on the side of getting it stopped. These people love chaos. They love our lives being in chaos because of them. Because they know there's only so much chaos we can stand before we turn off everything. And that allows them more control over our lives without having to conceal it, because they know we're not watching them anymore. And they know that if there are a few people watching, they're thrown into the category of conspiracy theorist. It's a perfect setup. It's a perfect setup, and police cars everywhere. That's the second one that passed me while I was walking on this street. All the government really needs to do to get away with murder is create a population that believes that a patriot never questions government stories. Stand up and salute the flag whenever it passes in a parade, and never question the official stories. We're here, folks. Outlandish lies have passed without question, and we don't create an uproar about it because we believe we're patriots. Stand and salute the flag, then sit down and shut up. I recently started attending baseball games just because. And they're very good at the start of the game. The ceremony starts, everyone stands up, takes their hat off, does whatever gesture is appropriate for their people, their class, military, non-military. A moment of silence while the national anthem sings, and everyone's perfectly quiet. And we sit down and enjoy the ball game. That's patriotism. We have killed how many people in the last decade in the name of a myth of 9/11 buildings that fell. How many myths? I mean, how many times can we be told unbelievable stories and still believe them? I'll tell you how many times. There's no end. Because after you believe the first unbelievable story, the rest of them just aren't that hard. I could go into a list of events that happened before this one, but it's pointless. I would just be put into the category of conspiracy theorist, and that would negate every word I have to say. Because we believe what we're told to believe, and we salute the flag and then shut up and sit down. Amen. And someday soon, the tyranny that's here will become obvious, and it'll be cheered by those who profit from it, and those that are destroyed by it will stand in horror as once again the ovens fire up and the camps and the prison camps become our new final resting place. But at least we'll be patriots. This will probably be my last segment in this video. Like I said, I'll try to remember to append a little 9/11 truth stuff onto this. So thanks for listening.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th.
This video contains the main body of key evidence for a 9/11 conspiracy and all the important facts one needs to know in order to understand the real masterminds behind this horrific crime. A major key to the 9/11 puzzle is the amazing story of FBI agent John O'Neill. John O'Neill was the FBI's leading expert on Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. O'Neill quit his job at the FBI after he was blocked from investigating the activities of several aviation students who were training at a CIA-connected flight school known as Huffman Aviation in Venice, Florida. These men, who would later become the lead pilots accused of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, have a very interesting background. Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker, once listed his address as the Pensacola Air Naval Station. He also liked to hang out at strip clubs and consume cocaine, two things that are strictly prohibited by Islamic law. These hijackers apparently got their Saudi passports as well as their funding through a man named Omar Sheikh, who had connections with both Osama bin Laden and General Mahmoud Ahmed of the ISI, which is the Pakistani intelligence equivalent of the CIA. Ahmed was identified as the money man behind the $100,000 wire transfer to lead hijacker Mohammed Atta just days before 9/11. The ISI has a long history with the CIA, going back to the Iran-Contra scandal and a drug money laundering front known as the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. BCCI's tenants were, among others, Osama bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, and George H.W. Bush. In fact, BCCI is the only connection between Saddam Hussein and 9/11 that is known to exist. Huffman Aviation also has a history with the CIA. Located next to Barnum and Bailey Circus, CIA agents were sent here to learn piloting skills at the flight school and sleight of hand from the magicians at the circus. So after the Bush administration blocked John O'Neill from investigating these potential terrorists, he left the FBI and was persuaded to apply for a position as head of security at the World Trade Center. He was hired to start on September 10th and died his second day on the job, the Tuesday of 9/11. The next day, Jeb Bush would have all the records from Huffman Aviation thrown into the back of a truck and hastily driven straight onto a C-130, which took off never to be seen again. Nothing suspicious or anything. But let's get back to Marvin Bush and his role on the board of directors for Securicom, which ran security at the World Trade Center up until June of 2000, when Kroll Associates took over. According to Elevator Magazine, there was a 9-month complete renovation done to the elevators and elevator shafts in the two World Trade Center Twin Towers, performed by the Ace Elevator Company. According to William Rodriguez, a janitor at the World Trade Center, there was constant construction going on inside these buildings, and tenants' offices were getting moved around quite frequently. Finally, according to Scott Forbes and Ben Fountain, there was a full-scale power down and evacuation of the Twin Towers the weekend before 9/11. And before the Monday when John O'Neill would take over as head of security. Given this series of events, it is certainly plausible that Marvin Bush, the president's brother, having full unrestricted security access to these buildings, could have cleared work teams dressed as elevator repairmen to rig these buildings with super thermite and other explosives. Blueprints and pictures show us that a simple cut through 1 or 2 inches of drywall inside the elevator shafts of the Twin Towers yields unrestricted access to 4-foot crawl spaces between floors, where explosives could easily be hidden throughout the building without detection. There was also $15 million worth of reconstruction going on in World Trade Center Building 7 in the months prior to 9/11 when Mayor Rudy Giuliani built an emergency command bunker on the 23rd floor and installed it with bullet and bomb-resistant windows and its own independent secure air and water supply. These renovations were applied only to the 23rd floor, however there were lots of workers going in and out of the building running cable. So we have represented possible time windows where explosives could have been planted inside of these buildings. We also have a series of suspicious events to further indicate something sinister was afoot at the World Trade Center on and leading up to 9/11. The testimony of figures such as Barry Jennings and many of the firefighters and rescue workers, whose testimonies don't appear in the official 9/11 report, draw further scrutiny to the government's version of 9/11, especially after Barry Jennings was murdered. Furthermore, those brave 9/11 first responders who did speak out also signed away their government-paid medical bills in order to receive free medical treatment for cancer and respiratory illness from the toxic smoke which the EPA told them was safe to breathe. The 9/11 first responders also signed away their right to speak out publicly about the government and what really happened on 9/11. I hope this helps to explain the deliberate failure of the Keene Commission investigation into 9/11, who actually hired Henry Kissinger, a known political cover-up mastermind, to be the first head of the commission before he quit after he was questioned about his Saudi clients and his connections with the bin Laden family. He was replaced by Philip Zelikow, who helped Condoleezza Rice write the preemptive Iraq War invasion strategy and also happens to be author of a thesis paper on creation of public myth. How fitting. The most obvious indication that the entire government investigation and report on 9/11 is in fact a cover-up is the fact that the final report doesn't even mention World Trade Center Building 7. Building 7, the Solomon Brothers building, was the third World Trade Center tower to fall on 9/11. It fell late in the day after much of the city had been evacuated. At 5:20 p.m., this 47-story steel and concrete building collapsed straight into its own footprint in 6.5 seconds. In physics, for something to fall at the rate of gravity, there needs to be no resistance to its collapse, meaning that the support structure of the building would have to be removed by some external force, such as explosives, as there would be insufficient stored gravitational potential energy in this building to account for the massive high-order damage which was observed. Even if fire weakened the structure, it doesn't account for the symmetrical collapse of the building. Fire is an organic process which moves from one area to another as fuel is used up. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, was given the task of investigating the cause of collapse of these structures. It took 7 years for NIST to finish their report on World Trade Center 7, and independent professional analysis has found strong evidence that the NIST scientists are guilty of committing scientific fraud, since it can be proven that they lied about fire temperatures, thermal expansion of concrete, thermal conductivity of steel, removed shear studs, and added combustible fuel loads on the floors where the initial failures took place in their model, ignored prior knowledge of collapse as reported by Aaron Brown of CNN and Jane Stanley of the BBC, and the fact that World Trade Center 7's collapse looks identical to a controlled demolition and nothing like the NIST model. The science and the physics don't lie, and that's why the number of scientists, architects, and engineers who have signed on the petition for a new investigation continues to grow steadily bigger and bigger. If the collapses themselves weren't suspicious enough from a purely scientific standpoint, let's look at some underlying facts about World Trade Center 7. This was a secure federal office building that housed offices for the Department of Defense, Securities and Exchange Commission, FBI, and CIA. In fact, this was the largest CIA headquarters outside of Langley, Virginia. World Trade 7 was a federal building full of government agents whose primary purpose was to monitor the New York Stock Exchange. Investigations into money laundering, stock market fraud, insider trading, including the majority of Enron's financial records, were all destroyed in World Trade Center 7. Last but not least, World Trade Center 7 was the only off-site backup for the military's financial records. Due to the sensitive nature of allowing potential enemy countries to know how much our military is spending, they keep these black budget records classified and store them in highly secure places. The only other place these files are stored is in the Pentagon's Financial Accounting Office. Oddly enough, on September 10th, Rumsfeld announced that there was $2.3 trillion in unadjusted funds from the Pentagon budget, meaning that the money was unaccounted for, missing. The next day, all the files to track down where that money went were destroyed when something, allegedly Flight 77, smashed into the west wing of the Pentagon. Even more curious is that in the months prior to 9/11, there was a complete renovation of that section of the Pentagon as the walls were reinforced to withstand missile impacts. This was the only section of the Pentagon that had its walls reinforced. During that construction period, many offices and filing cabinets were moved around. It would appear that elite forces within the government used this opportunity to get rid of inconvenient files and people. Another interesting point is that there is no solid evidence to prove that Flight 77 actually hit the Pentagon. The damage pattern on the ground and building is inconsistent with a large commercial aircraft. The FBI or someone else confiscated all the 84 security cameras which caught the incident on tape, and only released 5 frames from one of them to the public. So this raises the puzzle that if a missile hit the Pentagon and not Flight 77, what happened to the real Flight 77 and all the passengers on board? A close, careful look at the passenger list might give us some clues. There are more top-secret security clearances on this airplane than there are in most medium-sized cities in America. Especially astounding in this bizarre passenger list is the preponderance of Navy personnel amongst the 4 armed services and a tilt toward propulsion and guidance systems amongst all of the possible secret technologies. It appears that these people were murdered in order to prevent them from talking about systems that they had worked to help set up. A close, careful look at the passenger list might give us some clues. There are more top-secret security clearances here on this passenger list than there are in most medium-sized cities in America. Especially astounding on this bizarre passenger list is the preponderance of Navy personnel amongst the 4 armed services and a tilt toward propulsion and guidance systems among all the possible secret technologies. One of those systems was an onboard warning and control system which could take control of any commercial aircraft and fly it by remote control. AWACS was developed by Systems Planning Corporation, a company owned by Bush's good friend Dov Zakheim. The prevailing conspiracy theory is that the planes were hijacked and flown into the buildings by remote control. This is further supported by the final flight maneuvers performed by the second plane to strike the World Trade Center. Since every amateur videographer in New York City had their cameras pointed up at the burning Tower 1, the second plane strike was filmed from nearly every conceivable angle. Expert analysis of this plane leads to some startling revelations. First, there is the expertly controlled flight characteristics of this plane. During its last 20 seconds of flight, UA-175 made a single corrective maneuver so perfectly timed and executed that it could not possibly have been piloted by human hands. Then there is the extra piece of equipment on the underside of the plane. This was analyzed by several experts who confirmed that it was not a Shadow, but a Martin Marietta AWACS flight controller, mounted underneath the front of the plane.
One of the things that jumped out at me when I looked at the footage of the video of Flight 175 as it went into the World Trade Center is it appeared to me that there was something on the under fuselage of that aircraft that did not belong there, at least not with a commercial airliner. Now, I'll tell you where I have seen attachments that look like that on military aircraft. So the question you have to answer now is, was that the commercial airliner that hit the World Trade Center, or possibly was it an aircraft that looked very similar but was a military type airplane?
All the recorded sources, all the different photographic evidence that was produced by CNN and ABC, they all show this pod. It's there. You can see it with your own eyes. And in my professional opinion, that there was a pod attached to the bottom of that aircraft, and therefore it was not United Airlines Flight 175.
They attacked loose change so severely for bringing this up that they actually got a lot of people to back off of it. Shortly after, they began a massive no-plane theory disinformation campaign to further obfuscate the truth. They would have their agents pose as conspiracy theorists and go on TV and radio shows to misrepresent the 9/11 truth movement, creating turbulence within and ridicule from the outside. According to Mike Ballone, a 9/11 rescue worker at Ground Zero who actually physically saw one of the black box flight data recorders taken from the World Trade Center rubble, said the FBI then confiscated the evidence and warned people not to talk about what they saw. Now, the official government story denies that they found any of the black boxes. However, if you look at every plane crash in aviation history, they always find the black boxes. Obviously, these black boxes contain information that the government doesn't want the public to see. So what really did happen to these planes? If you take a careful look at the flight paths of American Airlines 11 and UA-175, the two flights that took off from Boston's Logan Airport and crashed into the Twin Towers, you'll find a major clue. X marks the spot on this treasure map, as it turns out that not only did both these planes cross paths directly over Stewart Air Force Base, but they did so at the exact same time. Another odd synchronicity is Flight 93, which had been sitting on the tarmac delayed at the airport for nearly 40 minutes with no explanation. Originally scheduled to take off at 8:01 a.m., it was delayed until the moment that Flight AA-11 crashed into the North Tower at 8:43 a.m. It would appear that Flight 93 was their backup plane in case one of the other flights was intercepted. After all, you've got two towers rigged for demolition. You can't take the chance that one of these planes gets intercepted. Another interesting piece of evidence that ties Stewart Air Force Base to the center of this 9/11 conspiracy is the white mystery planes spotted over Washington and the Pentagon. Through careful investigation, we've been able to map out the flight paths of these two ominous aircraft, which have been identified as E-4Bs, a type of aircraft that the military uses as mobile command posts. What concerns me is that both of these aircraft took off from and landed at Stewart Air Force Base. Finally, none of this could have ever happened if NORAD and our military air defenses hadn't been deliberately dismantled. The planes would have been shot out of the sky much like Flight 93 appears to have been. Rumsfeld took away military authority to shoot down civilian airlines in June of 2001 and gave it back again in November. Operations Vigilant Warrior, Vigilant Guardian, Northern Vigilance, and Northern Guardian were military exercises that involved sending all our air defenses to Canada to fight an imaginary Russian fleet, placing false radar blips onto FAA radar, and running hijacked plane scenarios which effectively left the military with only 4 planes to defend the entire northeast sector, while the FAA at one point had as many as 22 hijacked aircraft on radar to deal with. Under normal circumstances, NORAD would have responded to a hijacked aircraft within an average of about 11 to 14 minutes.
I wanted to focus just a moment on the Presidential Emergency Operating Center. You were there for a good part of the day. I think you were there with the Vice President. And we had that order given, I think it was by the President, that authorized the shooting down of commercial aircraft that were suspected to be controlled by terrorists. Were you there when that order was given?
No, I was not. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Well, at the time I didn't know what all that meant. And
the flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And so I was not aware that that discussion had already taken place. And but in listening to the conversation between the young man and the Vice President, then at the time I didn't really recognize the significance of that. And then later I heard of the fact that the airplanes had been scrambled from Langley to come up to DC, but those planes were still about 10 minutes away. And so then at the time we heard about the airplane that went into Pennsylvania, then I thought, oh my God, did we shoot it down?
Given all of these facts, which I encourage you to investigate for yourselves, who can we conclude was most likely the mastermind behind 9/11? Do you still think it was just Al-Qaeda? Or could Al-Qaeda really be Al-CIA? Of course, it wasn't the whole CIA, just an elite group of well-connected opportunists. Alvin Bernard, or Buzzy Krongard, was third in the CIA before 9/11 and was connected to a firm that purchased put options on American and United Airlines during the week leading up to 9/11. Options were also placed on Merrill Lynch, one of the largest World Trade Center tenants. This is clear evidence of insider trading and foreknowledge connected directly with the CIA. Krongard is also connected with Eric Prince of Blackwater, another company that made a fortune off the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. The Bin Laden Construction Group was hired to build permanent U.S. bases in Iraq, so the Bin Laden family benefited from 9/11 as well. Osama, the black sheep of the family, was a small price to pay considering the benefits. The Bush and Bin Laden families have been friends and business partners through the Carlyle Group for over 25 years. The Bush family can also be connected to nearly every single facet of the 9/11 conspiracy, from the very conception of al-Qaeda and the Mujahideen under the Carter administration, where George Bush Sr. was director of Central Intelligence, to the Iran-Contra scandal where he was vice president under Reagan. In fact, George H.W. Bush is the only person to ever be vice president, president, and director of the CIA. The day of 9/11, George H.W. Bush was meeting with Osama bin Laden's brother, Shafiq bin Laden, on Carlyle Group business at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Washington. While all other flights were grounded that day, the bin Laden family was allowed to fly out of the country. Chief Pakistan spy General Mahmoud Ahmed also met with Bush administration officials the week before 9/11. Ahmed also met with Bob Graham and Porter Goss on the morning of 9/11. These are the core facts of the 9/11 conspiracy, and I encourage you to do your own research into them as well. It's pretty obvious that the people in control of this puppet government will never give us a real investigation into 9/11, as all their final reports have been replete with omissions, distortions, and lies. It is up to we the people to form organized, nonviolent resistance movements for the truth. We are soldiers in a new type of warfare, information warfare.